Hi, I'm Sebastian Lara, llama enthusiast, and this is Mackenzie.
Sebastian's llama farm is our first step on our current day study on the Industrial Revolution. This farm is a symbol of life before the Industrial Revolution in Great Britain. The population is rising and the agricultural revolution has spread staples and animals across the globe, helping revitalize starvation in European nations that occurred during the Hungry 40s after a potato blight in Northern Europe. The potato is being planted throughout Europe along with corn from the New World. Landowners are fencing off their lands in the enclosure movement, and farmers and workers are migrating to the cities. A change is on the way, and we're going to find out why.
In the late 1700s, most people worked in the fields on land they did not own. Those who owned the land, called aristocrats, lived refined lives in elegant manor houses. Servants raised their children and did their housework. The landowners and the people who worked for them depended upon each other.
So Sebastian, wow, you've grown. I hear your grandfather had one of the earliest llama farms in Great Britain in the years before the Industrial Revolution in the mid-18th century. Can you tell me anything about this period?
Well, Charles, life in Great Britain was a lot more prosperous than in Europe.
Really? Tell us why.
Well, Britain had a booming economy. Boom. Also, they had booming overseas trade, a high standard of living, and was a leading exporter in tools, guns, hardware, clocks, and crafts. Did I mention Britain had the largest merchant marine? The largest, in fact, the largest. Britain had a very fluid society, kind of like a waterbed. Britain had cheap imitations, a less involved court, and a less powerful aristocracy. Unlike other European nations, class lines were not as sharply drawn. To change your class, all you needed is a wad of cash. Some moolah, baby.
Any last comments?
Well, Britain had water transport and the largest merchant marine. The largest. And regional specialization, of course. Can I say something about Europe at that time?
We'll look at that after this clip.
It was a system that had existed for centuries. In towns across England and the United States, a series of extraordinary innovations would alter the way people lived and worked for the next 150 years.
Welcome back, Sebastian.
Welcome. Well, Europe was garbage, and not the good kind. European nations were highly commercial, had rigid social systems, high transport costs, a lack of specialized markets, and a war and revolts that ultimately slowed the diffusion, kind of like molasses.
So what you're saying is that Britain had developed into the ideal environment to develop and industrialize, setting it ahead of other European nations. The agricultural revolution, ideas of invention, and population growth had sparked a revolution, the Industrial Revolution.
Indeed, that is what I am saying.
Did women have any role in this change? What was the gender structure?
Well, as always, the men were on top. Before the Industrial Revolution, women worked in coffee shops, and eventually this practice stemmed into the flow of ideas and thought. This really was a big initiation point for the Industrial Revolution.
Well, Sebastian, thank you for your insight.
Thank you very much. We are now in the second part of the Industrial Revolution study. We have moved from the rural farmland to the city. Great Britain is going through the Industrial Revolution, and it has changed the average way of life dramatically. Now, instead of people mainly living in rural areas, the population is centered in crowding cities.
Urban crowding at its finest. Sebastian, how did the Industrial Revolution impact Great Britain?
Well, the Industrial Revolution changed the way people lived and the environment they lived in. As a result of the Industrial Revolution, the environment became much more polluted. This was a problem because the people were flowing into cities and the air was barely breathable.
What were some of the causes of pollution?
Well, Charles, 5 new innovations spurred industrialization during this time. A taste for tea, coffee, and cocoa called for the need in porcelain, a product almost unreachable for others outside of the upper classes. Josiah Wedgwood started his own pottery business and produced it cheaply through the means of division of labor. Unlike production beforehand, individuals split up the manufacturing process into simple, repetitive tasks that even an unskilled llama lover like myself could perform. This allowed identical products to be mass-produced, therefore quickly increasing the productivity of labor and lowering the cost of manufactured goods.
Interesting.
Well, I wasn't finished. So anyways, the large industry of this period was based on cotton. So soft, I must admit. Work before the revolution had been done by hand, but the inventions that emerged during this period revolutionized the spinning of the cotton thread. First was the spinning jenny, invented in 1764, and was cheap and easy to build. This invention quickly replaced the putting out system, where the production of goods was done in private homes under the supervision of a merchant who puts out the raw materials and picks up the finished product when it is complete to later resell it in the marketplace. However, all the jenny did was throw out the cotton fibers and twist them into a thread. So this guy, Richard Arkwright, comes out with the water frame. His invention produced threads strong enough to be used without linen.
Fascinating.
Please stop interrupting me. His invention required energy to run, which was only provided by fast-moving rivers. Get it? Water frame? Okay, in America, Eli Whitney patented the cotton gin, which separated the bolls from the fiber and made cotton growing economical. The industrialization made cotton America's most valuable crop and boomed the domestic market in New England, forming the Cotton Kingdom in South America.
It seems to me you are referencing the change to mechanization. In other words, the application of machinery to manufacturing. This process both reduced hand-on labor needs and increased production.
I was getting there. So then I'll get on to iron. Iron revolutionized weapons and household items. However, the production of iron led to deforestation as well as the increasing price of charcoal, making iron a more valuable metal than before the Industrial Revolution. Then Abraham Darby comes along with coke. Not that kind of coke. And no, not that kind of coke either. Coke was coal with impurities that had been cooked out. By using coke, iron was produced much more cheaply. And in 1784, here comes Henry Cort with the puddling process, stirring molten iron with long rods to remove some of the coke smelted iron impurities. With the fast and cheap production of silver, the largest iron building in the 1850s was built named the Crystal Palace, and it was made of all glass and iron. The processes to produce iron and piece it together required a large amount of labor, and the presence of coke and smog polluted the air and
What a hard compromise.
Okay, now to get steamy. The steam engine, what I consider the most important piece of the whole revolution. The steam engine is a machine that turns energy released by burning fuel into motion. Thomas Newcomen discovered the first crude model, but James Watt vastly improved it. The steam engine was advanced with separate condensers and sun and planet gears that allowed the machines to power machinery and power steamboats. Commercial steamboats were sailing the seas of the Americas, and the United States was fast becoming a state moved by water.
Okay, tell me about the all-important railroad.
Yes. In 1804, Richard Trevithick built the engine that can soothe much less coal than previous models, and with the engine he produced several steam-powered vehicles that were capable of traveling on roads or trails. After a contest between steam-powered locomotives and horse-drawn wagons, the rocket's success sparked a railroad building mania in Britain. In the late 1830s, entrepreneurs built lines between major cities and passenger traffic soared. In the United States, entrepreneurs built railroads quickly and as cheaply as possible. Travel that had once taken weeks could now be made in only a few days. Railroads opened in the Midwest and turned the vast prairie land into farms, not llama farms, unfortunately, which feed the industrialized cities in the East.
Oh, my apologies.
Oh, that reminds me of my next point. Alessandro Volta invented the battery in 1800 and made possible an electric current. This made communication possible. The first practical electric telegraph systems were simultaneously developed in England and the Americas. In 1837, Charles Wheatstone and William Cooke introduced a 5-wire telegraph in England, and Samuel Morse introduced a system of dots and dashes that could be transmitted with a single wire.
Yes, the Morse code. A great movie.
Yeah. Well, railroads strung wires along railroads and could transmit information between stations about departures and arrivals, the beginning of future global networks of communication.
And here we are today with global communications and iPhones. So as a result of all these new inventions, what was happening to food production and birth rates?
Well, when it comes to birth rates, they were decreasing. As a result of the hard working conditions and lower pay, it became hard to care for a child. Most children were either abandoned or drugged so they would stay quiet while their parents worked. As for food production, it went up drastically to counter the rising population size. Yet as the population and food supply was going up, the amount of human labor required to make the food went down due to mechanization.
It appears that changes during the Industrial Revolution represent the business cycle, beginning with a population growth, an economic boom, and later periods of stagnation and discontent. The last question I have for you regarding the impact of the revolution is this. What was the government like?
Well, the two major political systems at this time were the laissez-faire capitalism approach and the positivism approach. The laissez-faire capitalism government was based on the principle that the government should stay out of the economy. The principle was introduced by Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations and challenged the previously existing economic doctrine, mercantilism, which argued that government should regulate trade in order to maximize their hoard of precious metals. Capitalism was argued against, and several utopian societies rose as it was argued that social corruption was spurred by such economic systems. The positivism philosophy says that all social and economic problems can be solved by the scientific theory. I tend to lean towards the laissez-faire because it allows me to spend more money on my llamas.
What were the responses to the laissez-faire idea?
Well, Thomas Malthus and David Ricardo believed that the cause of the workers' plight was the population boom, and which led to the falling wages and damaged the food supply. Also, they believed the workers' poverty was a much result of the natural law, as the wealth of successful businessmen and the marriage must be delayed to avoid mass famine.
Okay.
Since workers didn't benefit much from the middle-class philosophers, workers resisted the harsh conditions on their own way through riots and strikes. Workers gradually demanded universal male suffrage and shorter workdays. In response to the mass movements, the British Parliament investigated the conditions of the factories and mines and passed the Factory Act of 1833, prohibiting the employment of children younger than 9 in textile mills and limiting the working hours of children. Also, the Mines Act of 1842 prohibited the employment of women and boys under age 10 underground. They even replaced the Corn Acts, a tariff on imported grain.
Who had the advantage in this case of the repeal?
It lowered the cost of food for workers and allowed employers to pay lower wages. The repeal represented a victory of the class of manufacturer over the landowners.
Thank you. That wraps up this segment of our tour for today. Sebastian, always a pleasure.
And I also just wanted to let you know that I did my llama in the, and it reminded me of the railroad, because I was riding the rails of the crazy train. I'm a pedo. They spit too, so yeah.
If I were a woman, I could never work in a factory in the Industrial Revolution because I would never have time to be with my beautiful llamas. During the Industrial Revolution, primarily lower-class women were forced to work long hours under horrendous working conditions, receiving only 1/3 of the pay of a man.
Real beneficiaries of the Industrial Revolution were mainly members of the middle class due to the growing of the Industrial Revolution and its resulting social and economic effects. Members in the upper class also benefited from the revolution, however, mostly maintained the power and control they held previously. These classes became more powerful and led to better food supply and housing, therefore ultimately increasing their life expectancy. The growth of the industrial allowed a new class entrepreneurs to begin self-financed enterprises, and over the course of a century, these individuals, like Arkwright, bought themselves into high society. Women in the upper and middle classes mainly stayed and were restricted within the home to do housework, chores, cleaning, cooking, and caring for the children, while the husbands worked. This situation was known as the cult of domesticity.
I'm off to work. It's little Johnny's first day in the factory.
Alright, I hope you make it through the day. I'm gonna hit the pub and search for a job in the mines. Don't forget the opium. We can't be sure I'll behave.
Will do. If I keep at this job, we'll finally have money to buy a better house and have dinner on all our plates.
Don't get your hopes up. Try to keep Johnny away from the heavy machinery. You wouldn't want him to get caught up in his work.
It's my back again, and my cough is back. I'm just tired and long hours, the usual. It's nothing. The conditions just aren't getting better. Even Jill in the U.S. says the promises of better working conditions are being overweighted by making profits.
Oh, it's okay.
Get to work. You're late already, and my husband doesn't pay you for nothing.
Sorry, ma'am, will do. It's little Johnny's first day.
Well, keep him quiet if you want to see your week's pay. You're lucky I even came out here to watch over you. I belong in the house. The chores don't do themselves, and the servants slap when I'm not around.
Will do. Can we talk?
Hurry now.
Well, it's hours and the conditions. It's hard on us women in here. It's hard on everyone.
It's not my business. I've got a part of a small business to run. I shouldn't even be here. Like I said, my life is in the house.
But it's hard.
Don't get to work. Unless the government is willing to force a change, get used to it. If you work hard, you will succeed. You only have yourself to blame for your unsuccessful nature, dear. Excuse me, I am concerned with the helplessness of such. I'm hungry.
Should I call Ryan?
Shut up!
That's in the video now.
I'm off.
I say
Oh
that.
my god. What? What?
You obviously have a death wish.
Really? You say
I
that
say that
too?
to you all the time.
You do? Oh, we're still videotaping.
Oh, we're going.